Hey everybody, welcome back to The Connectionalist. I'm Reverend Matt. I'm an ordained United Methodist elder, and we are, I think, concluding today with Extra History's Part 4 of Early Christian Schisms. And so I hope you go drop a subscribe and a like on the original content creators video, because we want to make sure we're supporting our original content creators, because they really kind of provide us the textbook with which we dialogue with, and I provide commentary on, and we learn together about new things. And so we're going to be doing that today with part 4 of Early Christian Schisms from Extra History. If you like that, make sure you subscribe to this channel as well and drop a like. It's literally the best thing you can do to help out the channel. So let's get started. I need to get a dope intro like this.
Jump forward with us 125 years from the Council of Nicaea to the last days of the Western Roman Empire.
476
Gaul, Hispania, much
AD,
of North Africa
somewhere
have
around
all
there.
been lost. Aryan barbarians
The
control
barbarians.
nearly all of the Western
King
Roman world.
Odoacer.
Britannia had long ago been abandoned. The Huns have smashed into the empire, sapping its remaining strength. But there was still the East, with its rich provinces of Anatolia and Egypt to support the empire. If the East would just step in, perhaps Rome could be put back together as it had under the reign of Aurelian. But the East was in the middle of a religious dispute. Now, that wasn't the only reason this didn't happen, of course. At this point, the East and the West had in some ways become closer to rivals than to coordinated parts of the empire. And the Huns, although not causing as much damage as in the West, had extracted unimaginable...
I think that's a good point. So before the fall of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire and the Eastern Roman Empire are split into two administrative districts by Constantine, I think, in the 4th century. But by 476, when Rome falls, they're technically a part of the same empire, but like you said here, they're really more rivals at this point. That just goes to show things don't just happen, like I said in the last part, things just don't happen overnight, right? Things develop over time. Relationships and nations change over time, and there are gradual separations between each other before they finally consider themselves separate, or the Western Roman Empire falls, right? We'll see that later when we talk about, in a future video, talk about the Great Schism of the Church between East and West that comes later in the 11th century. 11th century? Yeah, it's 1056, right? Something like that. I'm sure my seminary professors would be like, you got to know the date of that. But yeah, like I said, it's really important that we understand history is developing over time.
Tribute from the Eastern Empire. But for all that, it certainly didn't make it any more likely that the East would step in when, in the middle of this crisis, the Emperor Theodosius II found himself mired in a religious schism. And here's where it gets really complex. All that esoteric and minor doctrinal stuff we talked about in the previous episodes, that's just a warm-up for what's coming now, so get ready. So there's this monk, Nestorius, and he's chummy with the emperor.
Nestorius.
He gets tapped to be the Patriarch of Constantinople, just about the biggest deal you can be in the Christian world at the time, with Rome itself still barely part of the empire. But he gets caught up in a local debate over the nature of Christ and starts espousing that Christ has two separate natures, one divine and one human. We'll call this Nestorianism.
Yeah, it is called Nestorianism. This is a heresy now, that Christ has two separate natures, his human nature and his divine nature. And he's going to get more into it, I'm sure.
This, of course, causes a huge flameout with the folks that we'll call, for reasons that will become obvious in a moment, the Chalcedonians, as they believe that Christ had two perfectly unified natures, one divine and one human, which, of course, caused a huge blow-up with the guys that we'll call the Monophysites, who believed that Christ was entirely of one nature, divine and human. I know what you're thinking. If anything, this all makes too much sense. But just in case a few of you got lost in how much sense that just made, I'll dive into a little more detail. That really is the basic split, though. Does Christ have two separate natures, two unified natures, or one nature that sort of encompassed what everybody else called two natures? And that may seem really trivial, but to people of the day, it was more than a simple matter of life and death. It was a matter of eternal life or eternal damnation. Yeah,
this is kind of the issue, is that the early church took... Look, these are essential religious doctrines, right? The Nestorian controversy, Nestorianism, spoiler alert, gets declared heresy, and he's going to talk about that. But just the way they deal with the opponents, right? It's so crazy. I mean, it's like there is an Orthodox faith, and yes, you need to believe in it, but the way they just were like, you're immediately damned if you do this is wild.
So this is really, really important to a lot of people, but it also gets wrapped up with church politics, regional disputes, and imperial authority, because this guy, Cyril of Alexandria, starts calling Nestorius' teachings heretical. But the clergy in Constantinople are all basically like, hey, who are you from faraway Alexandria to be telling us what to do? So Cyril actually reaches out to the Pope in Rome and asks him for a judgment, who in turn basically says,
So now we've got a Pope in Rome, right? They're not just calling him the Bishop of Rome, they're calling him the Pope of Rome, because this is the papacy has been developing.
Cyril, go excommunicate this guy if he doesn't change his mind in, 10 days. So Nestorius turns to his buddy, Theodosius II, and says, let's call a council and figure this out. And by figure this out, I mean let's excommunicate Cyril. But before the council even gets called, Cyril stands up and is basically like, you can't excommunicate me, I excommunicate you! And now it's on. The council is called, and Cyril tries to ninja his way into being the guy running the council, basically by saying, I'm the guy running this council. At first, this doesn't work,
sometimes
but
that works.
Several of the delegations are delayed, and this gives Cyril time to prod some of the undecided bishops until he has a majority. And so he just declares the council started and himself in charge. Nestorius is, of course, having none of this, doesn't acknowledge Cyril, and refuses to accept that the council can begin before the delegation from Antioch arrives, which it hasn't yet. The bishops who back Nestorius all show up to the place where the council's being held to protest, and things
You shouldn't start an ecumenical council until everybody who's supposed to be there is there. Come on.
start to get rowdy. At this point, the emperor's representative steps in and asks Cyril to just wait for 4 more days to see if the Antiochians arrive, which is when Cyril really steps up his ninja game and basically tricks the emperor's representative into reading the emperor's decree, which ends with an offhand line about how he wants them to, quote, start the council without delay and bring unity back to the church quickly. But an offhand line by the emperor is still an order by the emperor, and so with that imperial decree read aloud to what was effectively a quorum, because the protesting bishops who supported Nestorius were there in the hall, legally, for both the church and the state, the council had now started. And of course that council promptly held up the excommunication of Nestorius. But then the delegation from Antioch finally arrives, and miffed that Cyril had started the thing without them, forms their own council and excommunicates Cyril. So Cyril's council excommunicates the Antiochians, and now that everybody's
Oh, what a mess. What a mess. This is human beings. Anytime human beings are involved, these are the things that are going to happen. But really what the question is here is authority. Who has the authority to decide on this? That's a really difficult question, because to get authority, you have to have other people recognize that authority. It's a tricky game.
Excommunicated everybody else, everybody has to get word to the emperor, who's back in Constantinople, about who has been excommunicated. But the Nestorians have more friends at court, and they divert all of Cyril's messages, until Cyril's faction sends a man dressed as a beggar with a message hidden in a hollowed-out cane to secret his message through. So the emperor gets the news and banishes Nestorius, which clearly that resolves everything. Everyone would meekly give up, agree to get along, and all splits in the church would be healed forever. And yet, shockingly, everybody just kept excommunicating each other. The emperor called a second council to determine which of these excommunications were really legal, but this council was a mess too, famously known as the Robbers' Council, as it was convened with no time for any of the representatives from the west to get there, and so it was run almost entirely by Monophysites from the east. They proceed to excommunicate and condemn everybody even remotely connected with Nestorius. And then they went even further and basically declared that the only correct way to see Christ was as having one nature. And of course this sets off everybody. The Pope was livid. The bishops that were excluded were furious. And it goes without saying that those who got excommunicated or condemned without having any say in the matter were a little put out as well. So the church starts to tear itself apart over this. And in the midst of all of it, Theodosius II croaks. So the new emperor, Marcian, calls a third council to try to unravel this and figure out if any of it...
I love how the church cannot figure this out. They cannot be civil with each other and wait for each other to show up and wait for each other to arrive. And so the emperor, the state, has to get involved to get this resolved. It's crazy.
...was legal at all. So, this time, the bishops all come together at a place called Chalcedon.
Council of Chalcedon.
All of the things the Second Council had said were basically immediately overturned. A bunch of the folks who had supported the Second Council were demoted or excommunicated, and the Chalcedonian Creed, or the idea that Christ was 2 perfectly combined natures, was adapted as official canon of the Church. Okay, so surely...
Which is the stance today, right? So I recognize the Council of Chalcedon. I think it's important that we do. Nestorius... wanted there to be 2 separate natures, Jesus' human nature and his divine nature, which there's a lot of Nestorian heretics today, right? Like people like John MacArthur has recently been in controversy because he's been talking about how Mary is not the mother of God. He's like, she can't be the mother of God. She can't be the Theotokos, right, which is Greek for the God bearer, right? She can't be the mother of God. She's the mother of Jesus. But see, this is a Nestorian heresy, because he's saying, well, she can be the mother of Jesus, right, the human Jesus, but she can't be the mother of God. But the problem is the union, the hypostatic union, that they are together, right, and one nature. She is the mother of God because Jesus was Lord at birth. Right, we sing it at Christmas Eve every year. Jesus, Lord, at thy birth. Right, we sing it. That's what we believe as Christians, is that Jesus was Lord, Jesus was God at birth, and so she is the God bearer. And so to say that Mary isn't the mother of God is to deny the godly nature that is within Jesus, which technically, as you've seen and learned today, is heresy.
Now everything would be settled, right? Wrong again. See,
No.
this is right about where the Coptic, Ethiopian, Eritrean, Syriac, and Armenian Apostolic and Malankara churches split from what would now be called the Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, although at the time they were really one thing. Remember in the Justinian and...
That's important, that this is where a lot of these churches, like the Coptic church in Egypt that still exists today, this is where they split off, right? And you still have the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Roman Catholic Church that recognize Chalcedon.
Theodora
The Council of
episodes,
Chalcedon.
how Justinian kept trying to bring the church back together. This is the split he would later be trying to heal. And remember how Justinian was Orthodox and Theodora was Monophysite? Again, that's a big deal because this council, the Council of Chalcedon, split the whole Christian world down those lines.
Yeah,
And this division would rip the Byzantine world apart for centuries. It would take on political dimensions as well as religious ones, as one easy way to oppose the emperor was always to stir up whatever religious faction he wasn't a part of. This split would also make it easier for other groups to break the more Monophysite-leaning regions off from the empire as it started to decline. Who knows how history would have turned out without these schisms, heresies, and disputes? Would it have saved Rome, or would it have just left Europe even more
No, it wouldn't have saved Rome. All empires fall.
fragmented without those hard-fought ideas to bind it together? What we do know is that all this thought and all this effort helped to shape the late classical and early medieval period. For better or worse, these esoteric disputes played a huge part in the transition from the ancient...
I mean, you can call them esoteric disputes, and I'm sure to the non-Christian they are, but they are important things. It's important what we say about God. What I tell my parishioners is that what we say about God matters. It does. It may not seem like it sometimes, but what we say and believe about God really does matter.
world to the medieval one. So thank you for bearing with us as we wound our way through all that esoterica. These names, Arianism, Monophysites, Chalcedonians, they're going to come up again and again as we discuss this period of history. And there's no way we could give a complete picture of this era without them. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Excellent overview of the schisms. I really love Extra History. Make sure you go drop them a subscribe and a like on these videos. They do such a great job. And again, if you like what you're seeing here and you like learning alongside with me, I've been learning a lot. A lot of it's review, but I'm learning new things as well. Like, it was really fascinating when they were talking about the Council of Nicaea. I think it was in the last video, they were talking about how the laity were present as well. And I didn't know that. So I love to learn alongside you all as well. And if you do, make sure you drop a like and subscribe. That's the best way you can help the channel. But I will see you for the next reaction video and for my original content that comes early next week. So I'll see you then. Bye-bye.